To be here this morning. I want to thank Tim for sharing with us about his ministry. That's interesting. I deal with a lot of missionaries at Covenant Church. We have a missionary, can't even remember what country he and his wife are dealing with. His wife is having some health issues, so he has been here for about a year. But every day he's on Zoom calls, he's on just constant interaction with those people. And it's interesting to see all of that interaction. He sits in the lobby, or what we call the hub at Covenant, because it's got good Wi-Fi, and coffee pot is just a few feet away, and you know. We're looking this morning at Philippians chapter 2. Philippians is an interesting book written by Paul. It's one of the prison epistles. The church was established by Paul and Silas on Paul's second missionary journey. We find that their first converts, first was Lydia, the seller of purple. Purple was a very expensive cloth in those days. And then the second one was the jailer's family, the jailer and his family together. And they were all baptized in the river just outside of Philippi. But Paul ends up in jail, imprisoned, because there was this fortune teller gal, a slave girl, who was telling the future, and her owners were making a lot of money by selling her services of telling the future. And she is following Paul and Silas around, saying, and this comes from Acts chapter 7 and verse 17, "These men are servants of the Most High God, telling you the way to be saved." And she did this. She just followed them everywhere, day after day. And finally, Paul casts a spirit out of that girl. And then she's no longer useful as a fortune teller. So the owners were very upset and very indignant by what Paul had done. And so they had the city magistrates talked him into throwing them in prison, but first flogging them as a public display, and then putting them in prison. And so they are there in prison. And then the jailer then comes to know Christ and his family, and they feed them, and they are there, and they find out that Paul and his associate are both Roman citizens. So they have committed a crime just by flogging these men and putting them in prison as criminals without a trial. So the magistrates say, just turn them loose. And they said, no, we're not going to leave the prison. The magistrates need to come and escort us out of the prison before we're going to leave. Now, some things in Scripture are just hard to fathom, and this is one of those times where it makes you wonder, why did Paul do that? And I think it could be that there is a demonstration here. Roman power versus God's power, and it was a power struggle between the two. This particular book is written from Rome while he is under house arrest, which means he has to provide his own place and his own food while he can't leave that facility, and he is there for 2 years. Now, how do you support yourself, pay your rent, buy your groceries if someone isn't supporting you? And that's where this story comes in. Paul is writing to the church at Philippi because they have sent him a gift and someone to take care of him. And there's Timothy, there's Epaphroditus. Epaphroditus has gotten sick and almost died while he's there taking care of Paul. And so the primary purpose of this book is, first of all, to thank the church at Philippi for the gift that they've given him. It's also from chapter 1, verses 12 and 14 through 14, it's to report on the circumstances that Paul is in. He states that he's in chains for Christ. Verses 9 through 11 of chapter 1, Paul talks about the fact that he wants to pray for them, that their love may abound more and more. Paul says some very drastic things in this book. For instance, in chapter 1 and verse 21, he says, "For me to live is Christ, and to die is gain." We had a gal call yesterday morning and ask if she could come over. And she had something she needed to tell us, and it was not good news. She has cancer, starts chemo this week, and sometimes news is not good news. But he's in this house, he's in chains, but he says, "For me to live is Christ, and to die is gain." Verse 27 of chapter 1 says, "Whatever happens, conduct yourselves in a manner worthy of the gospel of Christ." That's a very tall order. No matter what you're doing, conduct yourselves in a manner worthy of Christ. We had an interesting experience last week. After the county fair was over, our kids were all done, our grandkids, not our kids. Our grandkids were done showing horses, goats, cattle, no pigs this year. They were done, so Thursday morning we headed for Shipshewana. And we went up and spent a few days there, and there was a Mennonite convention going on at the Blue Gate. And so there was 1,200 Mennonites. There were Mennonites in the campground where we were. There were Mennonites everywhere. I went to a tractor show Saturday morning while Jean was still in bed. And there was two tractors that one of them didn't have a driver, and so a guy came over to me and asked if that was my tractor, and I said, "No, I've driven one like that, but it's not mine." So we got to talking, and he was there for the Mennonite convention, and we got to talking about what are the most important things mission-wise of a church. Very interesting conversation. You know, we think of Mennonites as very close-knit. You grow your church by having lots of kids and keeping them in the church And so the church slowly grows by having lots of kids, and those kids marrying and having kids. But he says, really, the mission of the church should be growing by outreach. And he told me the story of he and his wife went on a mission trip to Haiti for 4 months. And while they were there, she came out of remission from cancer, and they had to leave early. And she did pass away. But he met a teacher there who was there teaching English in Haiti, and he remembered meeting her, and he contacted her through the mission board, and because he was a turkey farmer, okay? He needed somebody to homeschool his kids because his wife had just passed. And so he hired this gal to come and homeschool his kids. They eventually get married, and they are still married to that day. She was there with him. And it was just interesting to see how this guy's life and how God had pulled them together. She was from Shipshewana. He's from a distance away. But they were both born in the same hospital in Louisiana. How strange is that? As we were leaving, the wife said, I'm just going to refer to you two guys as the parking lot brothers in Christ. Because we had a lot of spiritual things to discuss. And, we had a very interesting trip. We were in the Amish grocery store that we always go to, and there was this lady with this big cart of stuff, mostly candy and things. I said, so are you having church at your house tomorrow? And she said, because that's normally what you see on a Friday or a Saturday, the people who are having church at their house, and it's a different place every week. I mean, they'll buy a lot of groceries that week. And she says, no, my daughter's getting married in October, and I'm buying ahead to get ready for that wedding. And she said, I said, well, did she pick a good one? And she says, well, I hope so. She says, divorce is not unheard of in the Amish culture. She says, it's probably more prevalent in your English culture, but we have it also. And it was just a very sweet conversation. She invited us to come to her farm, they're dairy farmers, and meet her husband. And that's very unusual that you get an invite like that. Now, her directions weren't very good. We couldn't find the house, but we tried. But, the interaction, and don't get Jean started talking about the Amish baby that she got to hold, the Glick baby, because after 4 boys, they finally had a girl, and little baby was out playing in the yard. And it was just an interesting interaction with people from a different culture. And the Amish are definitely a different culture. As I've been thinking about this particular passage, I came across a song sang by a Filipino gal, and the title of the song is Could You Be My Messiah? And it's a video, and it's very uniquely done. She is just an amazing vocalist, okay? But she is knelt down. The screen is black and white, and she never raises her head until the end of that song. And it's a 4-minute song, and she sings on her knees with her face toward the ground. And when she raises her face, she has tears coming down her face. It's a very personal song to her and very moving to her. I've watched a couple of vocal coaches review that song. And I've seen two different ones in tears just watching this gal's presentation of that, because it's a very moving experience talking about Jesus being her Messiah. So I asked the question this morning, what do we do to be, as Paul says in chapter 2 and verse 15, to shine like the stars of the universe? What are the things that you do that are unique to you? Everybody is different. You know, I've seen things in this congregation. I thought, wow, that's very unique. Didn't you guys serve ice cream out here on the sidewalk one Saturday morning? There's one way to get people's attention is if you give them free ice cream, or the offer to come and bake cookies in your house. What a unique idea. And what a blessing to those people that experience that. But every one of you have different areas. You have different people that you interact with. And the question is, are you shining like a star in the universe? If you read that whole passage, just read verses 14 and 15. Do everything without complaining, so that you may become blameless and pure, children of God, without fault, in a crooked and depraved generation, in which you shine like stars in the universe. Let's be that kind of person as we interact with all of those people that we come in contact with every single day. We're going to do the observance of the Lord's Supper